Patrick. I arrived home around 6 p.m. on Wednesday, my muscles aching from the extra hour and a half I had put in at work to complete the wiring job my supervisor Wayne had assigned that morning. It was a tough job, but I took pride in finishing it nearly half a day ahead of schedule, despite working myself to the bone all day. With Glenda away at her 3-day seminar in Columbus, I had been able to really focus and power through. Walking into the quiet house, I tossed my keys onto the kitchen counter and made a beeline for the fridge, eager for an ice-cold beer to soothe my parched throat. As I popped the cap and took that first refreshing swig, my eyes fell on the tickets for our spring break cruise, displayed prominently in the china cabinet. A smile played on my lips as I imagined lounging on the Lido deck with Glenda, free from work and responsibilities for a blissful week. I had been looking forward to the trip for months. Glancing at the clock, I realized I hadn't heard from Glenda since she left that morning. Usually she'd call or text to let me know she arrived safely. Figuring I'd check in, I grabbed the cordless phone and dialed her cell, plopping down at the kitchen table as it rang. She picked up on the second ring. "Patrick, I was just about to call you." Her voice was cheerful, but I detected a hint of something else. Relief? Nervousness? I couldn't quite put my finger on it. "You know I've always been able to read your mind, babe," I chuckled. "I take it you made it there in one piece? How was the traffic? Please tell me your car didn't fall apart on the highway." I could picture her rolling her eyes at my gentle ribbing about her driving skills. If I was there in person, she'd probably stick her tongue out at me like a petulant child. The mental image made me grin. "Traffic was fine, I'll have you know," she replied in a faux indignant tone. "Thanks to the map you printed for me, I found the Sheraton without a single wrong turn." "Well, you know I'd do anything for you, darling. Nothing's too good for my Glenda." I meant every word. This woman was my world. There was a slight pause on the other end of the line. "Actually, I'm kind of glad you stayed home instead of coming with me like we talked about," Glenda said slowly. "I think it'll be good for me to focus fully on the seminar content, you know? We'll have plenty of quality time together on the cruise." Her words stung more than I wanted to admit. I had offered to take time off work to accompany her, but she had firmly shut the idea down, insisting I stay home. At the time, I hadn't thought much of it. But now, an uneasy feeling stirred in my gut. Something felt off with Glenda lately, though I couldn't quite articulate what it was. Pushing my misgivings aside, I forced a laugh. "I hear you. Don't worry, I'll be a good boy and hold down the fort here. But you better believe I'm going to pamper the heck out of you on that cruise. I hope you're ready to be spoiled rotten." Glenda laughed, the sound easing my worries a bit. We chatted for a few more minutes about our days before a beeping noise interrupted our call, her second line. "That's probably the front desk," she sighed. "I need to run down to the lobby to finish checking in." "I'll call you tomorrow?" "Sounds good. Love you, babe." "Love you too. Bye." As I hung up the phone, I tried to ignore the sense of unease that had crept over me during our conversation. Glenda had been acting strangely for a while now, working late more often, being evasive about how she spent her time, pulling away from me emotionally and physically. I had chalked it up to stress at work, but now I wasn't so sure. Shaking my head, I grabbed another beer from the fridge and settled in front of the TV, hoping to quiet my racing thoughts with some mindless entertainment. But as I channel surfed, my mind kept drifting back to Glenda and the distance I sensed growing between us. By the time I finally headed up to bed hours later, I was no closer to deciphering what it all meant. As I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, my eyes heavy with fatigue, I caught sight of Glenda's travel bag sitting on the dresser. She must have forgotten to pack it in her haste to leave this morning. I walked over and picked it up, intending to move it to the closet where it belonged, when something else caught my eye, Glenda's journal, peeking out from beneath the bag. I paused, my hand hovering over the small, red leather-bound book. In our 8 years of marriage, I had only glimpsed Glenda's diary a handful of times. She was fiercely protective of it, always keeping it hidden away and making it clear that its contents were strictly off-limits to me. Early in our relationship, I had once jokingly asked to read it, but the look she gave me in response quickly shut down any further attempts. Since then, I had respected her privacy and never brought it up again. But now, seeing it there in front of me, I felt a powerful urge to open it up and see what secrets it held. I knew it was wrong, a violation of Glenda's trust. But the nagging sense that something was amiss in our marriage, coupled with the strange phone call earlier, made the temptation hard to resist. Before I could talk myself out of it, I snatched up the journal and headed back downstairs to the brightly lit kitchen. Settling into a chair at the table, I examined the book more closely. The cover was soft and worn, the pages slightly yellowed with age. A small brass lock held it closed, but I could see that only about a third of the pages showed signs of use. There was no way this single volume could contain 8 years' worth of entries. Curiosity getting the better of me, I decided to see if I could find the key. I doubted Glenda would keep it in the same place as the journal itself, but I figured our bedroom was as good a place as any to start looking. Heading back upstairs, I rummaged through her nightstand and dresser drawers, feeling more guilty with each passing second. I was about to give up when a small, unmarked box on the top shelf of her closet caught my eye. Pulling it down, I opened it to find a stack of identical red leather journals, each one bearing a numbered sticker on the spine. The one in my hand was unlabeled, but the others were marked 1 through 6. My heart raced as I carried the box downstairs and set it on the kitchen table next to the current volume. A quick examination of the journals revealed that they were all secured with the same type of lock, and a glance at the back cover showed they had been purchased from Coombs, a specialty store downtown. An idea forming, I grabbed the phone book and quickly located the store's number. It was nearing 8:35 p.m., but I knew many of the shops downtown stayed open late on Wednesday nights. I punched in the number and waited as it rang once, twice. On the third ring, a pleasant female voice answered. "Good evening, Coombs Specialty Store. How may I assist you this evening?" "Hi, I was hoping you could help me with something," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. "I'm interested in purchasing a journal as a gift for my wife. It's a red leather one, about 6 by 8 inches. I think she may have purchased hers at your store." "Let me check our inventory list," the woman replied. I could hear the faint clacking of computer keys in the background. "Yes, it looks like we have 2 of those in stock at the moment. Would you like me to put one on hold for you?" I hesitated, glancing at the stack of journals on the table. "Actually, I was wondering if you sold the locks and keys for them separately? I want to make sure I get one that will match hers." "As a matter of fact, we do sell the locks and keys individually," she confirmed. "They're a standard style, so any of our keys should work with the journals." "Bingo! That's great," I said, feeling a thrill of excitement mixed with apprehension. "I can be there in about 25 minutes. Will you still be open?" "Our doors are open until 9 p.m. tonight," she assured me. "Perfect. I'm on my way. Thank you so much for your help." As I hung up the phone, I knew I was crossing a line. What I was about to do went against everything I believed in when it came to honesty and trust in a marriage. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Glenda was hiding something from me, something big. And if her journal held the answers, I had to know what they were. I grabbed my keys and wallet, took one last look at the box of diaries waiting on the kitchen table, and headed out into the night. Little did I know, the secrets I was about to uncover would turn my world upside down and set me on a path from which there was no return. My mind raced as I navigated the familiar streets of downtown, my knuckles white as I gripped the steering wheel. What was I doing? Was I really prepared to violate my wife's privacy, to betray her trust, on the off chance that her journal held some clue to her recent behavior? But even as doubt crept in, I couldn't shake the memory of the strange phone call, the distance I had felt growing between us. Something was wrong, and if Glenda wouldn't talk to me about it directly, this was my only way to get answers. I pulled into a parking spot outside Coombs just as the clock on the dashboard flipped to 8:57 p.m. The store was quiet as I entered, the soft tinkling of the bell above the door the only sound. The same pleasant-voiced woman I had spoken to on the phone greeted me from behind the counter. "Welcome to Coombs. How may I assist you this evening?" Her smile was warm and genuine, and for a moment I felt a pang of shame for what I was about to do. "Hi. I called a little while ago about purchasing a journal and lock," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I believe you said you had a couple in stock?" "Ah, yes, of course. Right this way." She led me to a display near the back of the store where an array of leather-bound books in various colors and sizes were arranged on a shelf. She plucked a red one from the stack and held it out to me. "Is this the style you were looking for?" I nodded, taking the journal from her. It was identical to the ones waiting on my kitchen table. "Yes, this is perfect." "And you said you sell the locks and keys separately?" "That's correct. Let me grab one for you." She disappeared into a back room, emerging a moment later with a small brass padlock and key. "Here you are. The locks are all standard, so this key should work with any of the journals in this style." I turned the key over in my hand, surprised at how small and delicate it was. It hardly seemed adequate to guard a person's most private thoughts and feelings. I wondered if Glenda had a similar key hidden away somewhere, or if she kept it with her at all times. The saleswoman rang up my purchase, and I handed over my credit card, wincing slightly at the $60 total. A small price to pay for the truth, I told myself as I scrawled my signature on the receipt. As I walked back to my car, the journal and key tucked securely in a bag at my side, I tried to imagine Glenda's reaction if she knew what I was doing. Would she be angry? Hurt? Would she understand that I was only trying to help, to save our marriage from whatever had come between us? I thought back to the day we first met, back in high school. I was a scrawny sophomore, all gangly limbs and awkward angles. She was a confident senior, beautiful and brilliant and way out of my league. But somehow, miraculously, she had seen something in me, and we had begun a tentative friendship that blossomed into something more. We dated briefly, but after graduation, our paths diverged. I went into an apprenticeship program to become an electrician, while she headed off to college on a full academic scholarship. I thought that was the end of it, that I would never see her again. But fate had other plans. 4 years later, we reconnected at a mutual friend's wedding. The spark between us was immediate and undeniable. We started dating again, and within a year, we were engaged. I still couldn't quite believe that this incredible woman had chosen me, but I knew I would spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of her love. And I had tried, God knows I had tried. I worked hard to provide for us, to build a stable and comfortable life together. When Glenda landed her dream job as a sociology professor, I was thrilled for her, even though it meant long hours and frequent late nights at the office. I understood that she was passionate about her work, that it fulfilled her in a way that being a housewife never could. I supported her, encouraged her, did everything I could to show her that I was proud to be her husband. But somewhere along the way, something had shifted. The long hours turned into overnight trips to conferences and seminars. The sparkle in her eyes when she talked about her job dulled when our conversation turned to our marriage, our future. She began pulling away from me, finding excuses to avoid physical intimacy, to spend time alone. At first, I chalked it up to stress, to the demands of her new role as a junior faculty member. But as the weeks turned into months, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more going on. And now, with the discovery of her journals, I finally had a chance to find out what it was. As I pulled into the driveway of our modest 2-story home, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what lay ahead. I knew that once I opened that first journal, there would be no going back. Whatever secrets Glenda had been keeping from me, I was about to uncover them. Back home, I sat at our kitchen table, surrounded by the chronicles of our life, and contemplated the breach of trust I was about to commit by prying into her most private thoughts. I picked up her latest diary, fiddling with the ill-fitting key. To my surprise, it slid smoothly into the lock, the pages falling open before me. I quickly thumbed through to the most recent entries from yesterday. Glenda's usually pristine handwriting looked slightly shaky on the page. Moving to the kitchen sink, I absent-mindedly squeezed my soda can, causing it to overflow onto myself. Eventually noticing the mess, I cleaned myself up and moved to the living room, placing the diaries on the end table. Turning on the lamp, I settled into my chair with the 7th journal, eager to uncover the truth behind my shattered perception of my wife and our life together. Instead of reading in reverse, I opted for chronological order, hoping for answers. Tempted to confront her at the hotel, I dismissed the idea, fearing a losing battle or emotional breakdown. The first page, dated early June, marked the beginning of my search for clues within Glenda's diary. Despite finding contentment in her life, career, and marriage, none of the summer entries shed light on the shocking revelation from the last page. By early September, however, I found a crucial entry that hinted at the answers I sought, prompting me to read it twice. On September 8th, Glenda wrote about meeting her new teaching assistant, Anthony Romano, describing him as slightly taller with black hair, dark eyes, and a short beard. She noted his impressive qualifications. I searched the diary for further mentions of Anthony, but found nothing in the subsequent entries. Glenda seemed content but slightly anxious about handling a large class with over 100 students. On September 15th, Glenda wrote about Anthony assisting her in her large class, answering students' questions while she prepared lecture materials. She observed that her female students seemed fond of him, comparing him to Leonardo DiCaprio. As I read further, mentions of Anthony Romano became more frequent, prompting me to scrutinize the passages more closely. On September 20th, Glenda noted that classes were proceeding as usual, with a few students dropping out due to difficulty. She observed Anthony watching her during lectures from the front row and planned to assign him more work. On September 24th, Glenda mentioned working on a reading assignment when Anthony visited her office, helping with the task efficiently. She also expressed her intention to discuss future plans regarding children with me, marking the first mention of this topic. By September 30th, Glenda noticed Anthony's persistent attention during lectures despite her disapproving glance. Female students approached him for questions, showing more interest in him than in her. Despite this, Glenda felt pleased with her students' progress and the pressure she felt as a full professor. While subsequent entries omitted mentions of Anthony, Glenda remained optimistic about her classes and expressed her desire to discuss family plans with me after her first year as a full professor, planning to start trying to conceive at the end of the school year. On October 8th, Glenda excitedly shared with Anthony her decision to start a family with me after the spring semester. His supportive reaction led to an unexpected hug in her office, though she gently reminded him of their surroundings. On October 10th, Glenda felt uneasy when Anthony locked her office door during a visit, but he complied when she requested him to unlock it. His brief stay left her questioning his intentions. On October 11th, Anthony returned to assist Glenda, expressing a preference for mature women and apologizing for locking the door the day before. On October 13th, Glenda anticipated Anthony's visit to her office, but felt disappointed when he didn't show up. She wanted to discuss his interest in mature women further. On October 15th, despite hoping Anthony would stay after the students left her office, he left before she could engage in further conversation. On October 16th, Glenda finally spoke to Anthony, who expressed a preference for mature women based on his past experiences. She failed to assert her boundaries and regrets not condemning his behavior. Now she's haunted by the encounter. I found this entry troubling, realizing Glenda didn't react as I expected. I left the diary open and fetched a new can of soda before returning to read more about the situation with Anthony. On October 20th, just before leaving work, Anthony unexpectedly entered Glenda's office, disregarding her request to leave the door open. He confessed he had been thinking about her constantly and requested a longer kiss, claiming it was for his birthday. Glenda felt uneasy but agreed to get rid of him. Later she realized his birthday was in July, feeling tricked but laughing it off. She worries about his intentions and resolves to be cautious around him. In the following entries, Anthony is absent as Glenda focuses on grading tests and essays. I find it strange that Anthony didn't participate, but the journal offers no explanation. On October 30th, Glenda wrote that something difficult happened that day which she struggled to put into words. Anthony came into her office, locked the door behind him and pulled her towards him without giving her a chance to protest. She felt ashamed for not stopping him sooner. When she finally pushed him away, he insisted she enjoyed it. She asked him to leave, but he just smirked and said he'd see her tomorrow. She's struggling to handle the situation with Anthony. She feels trapped and is unsure whether to confide in me. Worse, she can't shake thoughts of Anthony from her mind. Reading the entry repeatedly, I realized I was filled with an anger I didn't know I had. On November 2nd, Glenda wrote that she finally stopped worrying about me noticing anything unusual. The first night was tough, but apparently I didn't suspect a thing despite her anxiety. It made her realize how easy it is to keep secrets from me. By November 6th, it had been days since Glenda was alone with Anthony. Even when he's in class, he still stares at her, making her feel uneasy. She wonders how she'll react if he comes to her office again. On November 8th, Anthony visited Glenda's office, but others were present. He kissed her quickly before leaving, making her uncomfortable. Despite that, she's considering attending a seminar series in Columbus after the new year. On November 9th, Glenda wrote that the previous day was another challenging one to recount. Anthony's behavior continues to trouble her, and she's starting to worry about how it will all unfold if she doesn't address it soon. Despite her efforts to focus on work, Anthony managed to enter her office unnoticed. When he attempted to kiss her, she hesitated before giving in momentarily. Regaining control, she pushed him away and retreated to the bathroom, overwhelmed with guilt and fear of my reaction if I ever found out. Anthony, unapologetic, left after expressing a desire for a repeat. Although upset, she managed to compose herself before I arrived home, masking her distress as we conversed throughout the evening. Seething with anger, I repeatedly reviewed the day's entry, focusing on the Anthony incident. Despite this, I observed a notable absence of mentions regarding Anthony or their relationship in Glenda's diary for the following week, which somewhat relieved me. On November 17th, Glenda wrote that she's grappling with a confusing situation. Anthony's influence over her is stronger than she anticipated. She can't decipher if it's his demeanor or her own vulnerability, but she feels powerless around him. That afternoon, she confronted him about their previous encounter, emphasizing the inappropriateness of their connection given her marital status to me and her professional position. Despite her assertiveness, he exhibited unsettling behavior, suggesting they lock the office door and inviting her to join him on the couch. She can't explain why she agreed. They've crossed a dangerous line, and she's torn between wanting to dismiss him from his role and justifying their actions. She writes that she can never confess to me, and she's relieved their indiscretions remain concealed, shielded by the privacy of her office. She hopes to regain her composure before returning home. I'm troubled by the escalating situation. I resolved to thoroughly read Glenda's diaries to better understand her. I revisited 2 pages once more, then glanced up to find it was already 2 a.m. Despite knowing there were numerous pages left, I couldn't set the book down. I left a message at work, indicating I'd be unavailable the next day due to personal matters. My life has irrevocably changed, leaving behind love and aspirations, replaced by a profound emptiness and mounting rage. Downing the last soda in the bathroom, I returned to the journal in the living room. Unaffected by caffeine, my mind raced, grappling with the weight of what I'd read. Glancing at my watch, I marveled at how just 8 hours ago I had conversed with Glenda, my suspicions yet to surface. On November 22nd, Anthony stopped by Glenda's office, but she maintained distance, keeping the desk between them. His behavior was appropriate. He didn't intrude or attempt to lock the door. Her guilt prevented any further involvement with him. She sensed his recognition of her resolve to maintain boundaries, hoping to uphold it in the coming days. Glenda's mood was upbeat as the semester neared its end. On November 23rd, she informed me about the seminars, and I was supportive, even offering to accompany her. She said she'll consider my proposal. It seems their dynamics shifted significantly from November 23rd to mid-December. On November 25th, Anthony visited Glenda's office, expressing a desire to visit our home. She firmly declined, emphasizing that it wasn't an option. He inquired about my whereabouts, suggesting a visit to his residence instead. Glenda rebuffed the idea and reiterated her stance. Despite his persistence, he remained relatively usual in his behavior, expressing interest in the seminars, despite their faculty-only status. Glenda wrote that November 30th weighed heavily on her. She said it was a day she struggled to recount. She feels utterly lost. Sleep evaded her, and apparently I sensed her distress. She wishes she could confide in me, but the words elude her. Anthony haunts her dreams, though she harbors no affection for him. She's tormented by memories of their encounters, questioning her inability to resist. She stood by as he locked the door, unable to protest, though throughout her mind screamed for her to stop. After he left, Tears streamed down her face as she dressed, consumed by regret. Glenda spent the day locked in her office, grappling with her thoughts, considering therapy. Despite Glenda's evident remorse, I can't fathom her actions, which deviate from her usual character. As I delve deeper into her journal, my disposition grows darker, unsettling those who know me well. On December 3rd, Anthony intercepted Glenda in the hallway, urging her to reconsider meeting him at his shared house. He desired closeness in a real bed, but she firmly refused, emphasizing the risk to her marriage with me and her career. Undeterred, he proposed accompanying her to the January seminars, even offering to cover his expenses if she spent nights with him. She rejected his advances, but his suggestion lingered in her mind. Glenda questioned her own weakness. Seething with anger, I took a break to calm myself. I resisted the urge to drink, opting for clarity instead. Though I was certain of my next steps, I knew I needed a solid plan. Returning to the living room, I resumed reading her journal. On December 7th, Anthony briefly visited Glenda's office to bid farewell before his Christmas trip home after his exam the next day. He inquired about returning early for the seminar, suggesting she might use it as a distraction. She postponed her decision, instructing him to call back in a few days. The next day, December 8th, Glenda misled me, convincing me to stay home while she attends a seminar, proposing a cruise as a diversion. Despite my reluctance, I eventually relented. She feels guilty about deceiving me. Although she hasn't committed to taking Anthony, she's considering it, reflecting on their previous encounter in her office. Despite her contentment with me, she inexplicably entertains thoughts of Anthony, valuing his experience. She awaits his call, pondering whether he'll persist or give up. On December 12th, Anthony called Glenda, reiterating his desire to join her in Columbus. He proposed booking adjoining rooms, suggesting she pose him as her brother. He plans to confirm the next day and cover the room expense. Now, she's faced with the decision of whether to consciously betray me. 2 days later, on December 14th, Anthony called again, expressing excitement about their upcoming stay at the Sheraton. Glenda reluctantly made the reservation, feeling guilty. He's leaving after the spring semester, no longer a TA. She hopes she can resist further temptation. Anthony has a certain allure that intrigues her unlike anyone else. She fears me discovering this, knowing it would devastate me. On December 28th, Anthony called Glenda at our home using a code name in case I answered. He confirmed their plans for New Year's Eve, and she reluctantly agreed. Deep down, she felt excitement too. She hoped this encounter would finally put an end to their affair. I had to work, giving her an opportunity to arrange the trip. Although she'd never spent consecutive nights with the same man before marrying me, Glenda decided to go along with Anthony's proposal, hoping it would disrupt her feelings. I glanced at the time. It was nearly 5 in the morning. I was close to finishing Glenda's diaries but was determined to read them all, despite knowing she hadn't cheated yet. I needed certainty. With tasks ahead, I left the last page unread, opting for coffee. I could rest later. On January 3rd, Glenda wrote that the next day was the big day. She's off for 3 days of seminars and nights with Anthony. She'll pick him up before leaving town and drop him off afterward. Luckily, I didn't insist on joining. Glenda got a map to ensure she finds her way. She discovered a Victoria's Secret nearby, planning to buy outfits to wear with Anthony. She's uneasy about it but plans to wash them before seeing me. Glenda forgot to remind Anthony about contraceptives, but they can stop by the pill store before checking in. She's surprisingly excited, though she worries about Anthony expecting new things. She'll save any new experiences for their cruise, framing it as adventure. Glenda has started packing, hoping I won't suspect anything. Reading her own thoughts, she questions if she can go through with it. What happened in her office was spontaneous, but this trip would be planned. She could refuse and cover Anthony's expenses, but she's already feeling aroused at the thought. I finished Glenda's 7th journal, contemplating all I'd read for the past 9 hours. I began to craft a plan for the next 3 days, convinced I was done with our marriage. I wasn't certain how to articulate my request precisely to the private investigator over the phone. "Can you provide photographic evidence and quote me a price?" I asked tentatively. The investigator, John Pearsall, seemed unfazed. The Sheraton, we can handle that. Is this ongoing? What's the time frame? I settled in and explained the situation. My wife is currently there until Saturday morning. She's in room 412 and the man she's with is in 414 adjoining rooms. They were there last night too, but I only decided to take action this morning. She's attending seminars and he's accompanying her. I wondered if John would catch the subtle irony in my words. John chuckled knowingly. Got it. Now I need more details on your surveillance preferences. First, can you provide their names and descriptions? I described Glenda and offered to send a photo if needed. I had found Pearsall investigations online but preferred a direct conversation. I also provided Anthony's full name and a vague description I had pieced together from Glenda's diary. It's straightforward, Mr. Dunn, John assured me. We can set up cameras in their rooms this afternoon and keep them there until after the weekend checkout. Installation is quick and we have access to the rooms at a fixed rate per entry. If you only need photo evidence and no ongoing monitoring, the cost is a flat $800. Wouldn't using a single camera be cheaper? I asked. I just need confirmation they were together. I prefer to check tonight and receive the photos by tomorrow evening if they stayed overnight. We'll need cameras in both rooms since we're unsure which they'll use, John explained patiently. Our cost covers quality equipment and access fees. Hiring a maintenance worker for 2 entries, installation and removal adds $100. Apologies, I'm new to this, I said, feeling a bit out of my depth. I'll pay upfront by credit card on your website. Great. Fill out the form noting case number 1372A. Once paid, I'll install the cameras and send you a DVD of the footage. Please provide your name and address for delivery. I found the process straightforward, but receiving the DVD by mail wasn't practical. Could you hold on to the DVD until I reach out? Right now, I just need photos showing they're together. Nothing explicit, just evidence of the affair. Understood, Mr. Dunn. I'll capture stills from the video feed. I provided my phone number and made the credit card payment during the call. John confirmed the payment and said he'd begin camera installation right away. With the arrangement settled, I finally gave in to my sleep deprivation. After a nap and a quick meal, I resumed reading Glenda's diaries, progressing quickly without rereading or overthinking. As I finished the first volume, Glenda called shortly before 10 p.m. The conversation felt surprisingly easy, with both of us hiding our respective secrets. I wondered if it was as effortless for her to conceal her intentions as it was for me. With my plans in place, I found it easy to proceed. Yet, I wondered if I would ever regain a sense of normalcy. Before diving into the second volume, I double-checked my arrangements. Friday held additional tasks, including a visit to the bank to sort out finances. I had already resigned from Anderson Electric, awaiting my final paycheck. It was well past 1 a.m. when I finished the second volume, taking longer than expected as thoughts of Glenda and Anthony lingered in my mind. My fatigue weighed heavily, prompting me to rest on the couch. Surprisingly, I dozed off and woke up at 7 a.m. feeling refreshed. After a quick breakfast, I resumed reading, starting the third volume anew. By noon, I had finished the third and fourth volumes, setting the diaries aside to tackle my to-do list. My first stop was Anderson Electric to collect my final paycheck and clear out my locker. Owner Gus Anderson tried to convince me to stay, but understanding my situation, he reluctantly bid me farewell, hoping I'd return someday. At the bank, paperwork delayed me, but I eventually left with a bag containing over $20,000 withdrawn from our joint and my personal accounts. Though I had hoped for more, I could only access immediate funds without Glenda's signature. Arriving home around 4 p.m., I checked the answering machine and found a message from investigations. Gathering myself, I dialed John Pearsall's direct line with bated breath. This is John Pearsall. How can I assist you? Hello, this is Patrick Dunn. Were you able to install the cameras and do you have any findings? I asked nervously. Yes, Mr. Dunn. We set up cameras in both rooms yesterday afternoon and got the results today. Both rooms were empty during the operation, so it was swift. I paused before asking the question I dreaded. Did anything significant show up on the footage? John's words hit me like a punch to the gut. Well, Patrick, it's difficult to say, but your suspicions are validated. They spent the night together in your wife's room and engaged in carnal activities multiple times. I've transferred the video to DVD, and if you still want them, I can email you 3 frames as you requested. Tears welled up in my eyes, surprising me. Despite what I had read in Glenda's diaries, having visual evidence made the situation undeniably real. Yes, please send the pictures. Thank you, Mr. Pearsall. If everything's settled financially, I consider our business concluded, I managed to say, trying to keep my voice steady. Yes, your payment settles the bill entirely. Are you feeling all right? Your voice sounds different today. Situations like this often bring emotional pain. I'm concerned, John remarked with a hint of worry. I'm okay, thank you. I'll reach out if I need anything else, I replied, my emotions under control, but with an edge of concern I couldn't fully conceal. John offered some final advice. Your attorney may require a copy of the DVD unless you pursue grounds other than infidelity for divorce. We'll retain it for a year or until instructed otherwise. Many clients find therapy beneficial in such circumstances. While not my expertise, a supportive therapist can make a significant difference. Thank you for your assistance, Mr. Pearsall. I have a plan to cope with this. I appreciate your professionalism, I said hurriedly, ending the call before any further discussion could ensue. With a stoic expression, I remained seated at the kitchen table until the sound of an incoming email caught my attention. Quietly, I entered the room housing the computer and accessed the email from Pearsall Investigations. I reviewed each of the 3 attached photos, promptly sending them to the printer loaded with 8x10 photo paper. Within moments, tangible evidence of Glenda's affair materialized in my hands. None of the photos depicted explicit acts, but one showing them lying together under a sheet bothered me the most. It marked a turning point for me emotionally. After a final examination of the photos, I placed them in a waiting brown envelope on the kitchen table. Returning to my chair, I resumed reading the 5th diary. Just before midnight, I concluded the last 2 volumes of Glenda's journals. Reflecting on the contents, I realized how closely Glenda had adhered to my perceptions of her. While there were few surprises, the diaries unveiled numerous insights into our past, shedding light on facets of our relationship I had never explored. I discovered that Glenda struggled with insecurity more than I had previously thought, evident from her journal entries. However, her profound love for me puzzled me, making her actions with Anthony even more baffling. The only revelation was that their initial meeting at a birthday party wasn't coincidental. Glenda had orchestrated the encounter, expressing excitement at the prospect of reconnecting with him. Engrossed in reading the 2 volumes, I realized afterward that Glenda hadn't called, and I was famished. As I prepared a sandwich and a drink, thoughts of Glenda and Anthony's interactions consumed me. These thoughts, combined with my decision, fueled my restlessness that night. Whether due to the meal or the vivid images of them lingering in my mind, I couldn't close my eyes without seeing them. At 7 in the morning, I abandoned my attempt to rest and rose to begin my meticulously planned day. With a packed agenda ahead, I opted for an early start. By 8:30 a.m., I phoned my sole surviving close relative, my brother Samuel. While we weren't estranged, our interactions were infrequent, typically limited to obligatory holiday gatherings. Just 2 weeks earlier, Samuel, his wife Mary, and their children, Sam and Brenda, had visited. I sensed Samuel's surprise at my unexpected morning visit, but found him and his family available. Engaging myself until slightly past 10 a.m., I eventually arrived at their home. Aware of the children's eagerness to resume their tasks, I gathered them in the kitchen. As Mary brewed fresh coffee, Samuel and I sat at the table. Recalling their recent Christmas gathering, I remembered the family's upcoming trip to Disneyland during spring break. Delighted by the surprise, I gifted each child a crisp $100 bill, eliciting expressions of gratitude and warm embraces. "You really didn't have to do that, Patrick," remarked Samuel, "but it was kind of you to see them so happy. How are you holding up? Strike it rich in the lottery?" I offered a faint smile. "No such luck. My fortune isn't worth boasting about. I just felt like being generous." We sat together at the kitchen table with coffee, engaging in casual conversation. Mary chimed in, "I suppose I can skip skirting around the topic of your big plans with Glenda. She mentioned your desire to start a family. I know you'll embrace parenthood as much as we do." I paused before responding. "She shared that with you, huh? Women don't seem to hold much back." Before Mary could interject, I redirected the discussion, asking Samuel about his work as a restaurant manager. After our coffee cups were empty, I stood to leave. "Just in case I don't see you until next Christmas, take care." I quickly shook Samuel's hand and gave Mary a brief hug. "I'll keep you in my thoughts." With those words, I walked away, exchanging farewells as I reached my car. Glenda. I arrived home just before 6 o'clock in the evening, noticing Patrick's absence as I entered through the kitchen. I had rehearsed our reunion but found myself flustered by his absence. However, I saw it as an opportunity to unpack and do laundry. As I contemplated another shower, I passed the kitchen table and spotted a note pinned down by a salt shaker signed by Patrick, explaining his sudden absence due to work. Although slightly disappointed, the note allowed me to proceed with my plans. Afterwards, I headed upstairs, opting for a relaxing bath instead of a shower. While gathering laundry, I spotted my journal on the dresser. I recalled leaving my journal in my emergency bag and retrieved it, relieved to find it untouched. Originally planning to update it during my trip, I had forgotten it until Patrick reminded me of its location. Finding it where I left it, I decided to update it while doing laundry. As my clothes washed, I made a quick meal and tried calling Patrick, only to realize his phone was in the wicker basket. I retrieved it and sighed, realizing my rhetorical question had no answer. Returning to the table, I unlocked my diary with a key from my wallet and began writing on the first blank page. I documented the eventful 4 days that had just concluded, even though some parts were unpleasant. I described picking up Anthony and his eager behavior, as well as the advances he made during the drive that bothered me until I warned him we could be seen. I relaxed more as we got farther from the city. At the mall, Anthony hurried to join me at Victoria's Secret, suggesting items I ended up buying. I wore one set for him Wednesday night, but disposed of it before leaving the store. I decided to discard the other sets too, not wanting reminders of my time at the Sheraton. I couldn't erase the memories, but resolved to try to move on. I recounted being in bed with Anthony on Wednesday night and realizing the vast difference between physical desire and genuine love. I ended things with him, but he didn't take it well. Despite my attempts to avoid conflict, he became angry. We agreed to sleep on it, but I already started planning how to make amends with Patrick. On Friday morning, Anthony ignored my refusal and persisted. I locked the connecting door between our rooms, but he made plans with someone else that night. Witnessing him with another woman made me realize he preys on vulnerable women like me. It was a relief not to argue with him, but I felt ashamed for falling into his trap. I dreaded the ride home with Anthony, but it surprisingly went smoothly. Seeing him for who he truly was gave me control over our interaction. He behaved decently and accepted my decision to end things. As we drove, I resolved to seek therapy to understand and overcome my vulnerability to him. I'm determined to ensure I never betray Patrick again. I also committed to making amends with him, even if he never learns the truth. Additionally, I decided to stop taking birth control and embrace the possibility of having children. After finishing my lengthy journal entry, I used the pen as a bookmark, left the book on the table, and headed upstairs to prepare a bath. I brought the cordless phone in case Patrick called. I filled the tub, added bath oil, lit some candles, and eased into the warm water. As I relaxed with my eyes closed, I nearly drifted off to sleep. Sensing I was being observed, I cautiously glanced around but found no one in the bedroom. I resumed relaxing and pondered how to mend things with Patrick after my misguided involvement with Anthony. An hour later, feeling rejuvenated, I returned to the kitchen. After transferring the laundry to the dryer, I returned to the table to review my journal entry. Momentarily puzzled by the absence of the pen, I remembered leaving it there, then spotted it on the kitchen table near the wicker basket. I retrieved it and opened my diary to read once more. On Sunday morning, I rose feeling rejuvenated and eager to embark on a new chapter of my life. After dedicating the morning to cleaning, I showered and donned an ensemble I knew Patrick admired. By mid-afternoon, I was seated at the kitchen table, enjoying coffee while a roast cooked in the oven. A knock at the side door interrupted my tranquility. My surprise turned to alarm upon seeing two burly men outside, a uniformed policeman with his hand on his holstered pistol, and an older man in a suit holding a police ID. The suited man introduced himself as Detective Rankin and his partner as Officer Reynolds from the Springfield Police Department. They were looking for Patrick. My face relaxed with relief as I assured them Patrick was at work. I offered to assist them. After exchanging glances, Detective Rankin suggested we step inside out of the chilly weather. I welcomed them in and led them to the kitchen, then asked why they were looking for Patrick, concerned he might be injured. Detective Rankin reassured me Patrick was fine as far as they knew. They just needed to speak with him about a case. When he asked if I was certain Patrick was at work, I retrieved the note Patrick had left and handed it to the detective as proof. Officer Reynolds positioned himself at the counter, keeping watch over the back entrance, his hands resting on his weapon. Detective Rankin asked to keep the note and placed it in his briefcase after I agreed. I nervously inquired why the police wanted to speak with Patrick, as he had never been in any trouble. The detective revealed they had received a homicide call that morning traced to Patrick's cell phone. They were working to determine his whereabouts at the time. Relief washed over me. I explained there must be a mistake, as I had tried calling Patrick the previous night but found his cell phone at home. I pointed to the wicker basket on the kitchen table. The detective looked skeptical and asked to check the basket. He examined it briefly, picked it up, then returned to the table and stated he saw no cell phone. He questioned if I was mistaken about the timing. I was shocked to find the basket empty. I searched around in disbelief, frustrated and concerned as I looked from the officer to the detective. I insisted the phone had been there when I tried calling Patrick. The detective noted he couldn't explain the phone's disappearance, but the homicide call had indeed been made from it. He then asked if Patrick was acquainted with Anthony Romano. I was taken aback hearing Anthony's name, my face briefly paling. I clarified that I knew Anthony, as he had been my assistant last semester, but Patrick did not know him. After exchanging glances with his partner, the detective pressed on, asking if I was absolutely sure Patrick had no reason to dislike Anthony. My panic grew as I reiterated that Patrick never met him. The detective made more notes before stating that Patrick apparently knew Anthony well enough to report him dead. Shocked, I sat down at the table and exclaimed that I had brought Anthony home with me the previous day around 5:30. I couldn't fathom how he could be dead. Detective Rankin took a seat across from me and inquired about my relationship with Anthony and if there could have been a motive for Patrick's involvement. I paled at his words. After regaining my composure, I stated that Anthony was just a high school student and neither he nor Patrick would have reason to harm him, though my tone lacked conviction. The detective let me stew in silence for nearly half a minute before speaking again. He described arriving at the address provided by Patrick and finding evidence of an attack on Anthony as he entered his home, a travel bag and footprints indicating a struggle in the hallway, signs Anthony lost the altercation and was dragged to the kitchen and bound to a chair with nylon electrical straps. I began to weep softly as the detective continued. Anthony had been shot in the left knee, likely hitting a major artery based on the blood loss, before being dragged to the kitchen. The medical examiner estimated he died between 6 and 8 p.m. from multiple blows and a final shot to the head. A post-mortem shot to the groin was also fired. I interjected that Patrick could never commit such an act, my tears giving way to anger. The detective consulted his notes and revealed that state records showed Patrick owned a .25 caliber semi-automatic pistol. One of the bullets recovered matched that caliber, tentatively linking it to Patrick's gun. Detective Rankin produced 3 photocopies found at the crime scene, positioned near Anthony in a way suggesting he was shown them before he died, with blood spatter confirming their presence during the fatal shot. He asserted I hadn't been fully forthcoming about my connection to Anthony or Patrick's involvement with him. I took the photocopies, my expression shifting to shock as I examined them. The realization sank in and I began sobbing uncontrollably, insisting Patrick couldn't have known. Just as the detective prepared to elaborate on more crime scene details, his cell phone rang. Throughout the 3-minute call, he remained mostly silent, jotting notes. Meanwhile, my crying subsided, leaving me quiet with my face in my hands, tears streaming down. After finishing his notes, the detective informed me Patrick's call was traced to Windsor, Ontario. Authorities there had located his cell phone in a bag with his credit cards and registered pistol, discarded in a Walmart parking lot trash bin. Patrick and his vehicle weren't spotted, but plates matching his car were also found in the trash. They suspected he swapped plates to blend in with Ontario traffic. The news failed to console me. I remained seated, crying inconsolably. After observing me for a few minutes, the detective retrieved another photocopy depicting a small brass key and asked if I recognized it. I examined the image and swiftly retrieved my purse, producing a matching key from my wallet. At that moment, I lost control, slumping in my chair. I could only utter the words, "diary," and "Patrick." The two men stayed with me for nearly 15 minutes, waiting for me to regain my composure. Eventually, they persuaded me to call someone for support. Once I assured them my sister would arrive promptly, they departed. Epilogue. It's been 5 years since that fateful day when detectives Rankin and Reynolds showed up at my door with news that shattered my world. Not a day goes by that I don't think about Patrick and Anthony and that terrible week that changed everything. Patrick managed to evade capture and remains a fugitive to this day. For the first year, I held out hope that it was all a misunderstanding, that Patrick would come home and clear his name. But as time passed with no word from him, I had to accept the awful truth of what he did. The man I loved and built a life with was capable of a monstrous act of violence. The revelation shook me to my core. Going through Patrick's belongings, I found the photos he had discovered of me and Anthony. He must have hired a private investigator to follow me. The depth of his rage and sense of betrayal still chills me. Knowing how close I likely came to being his next victim haunts me to this day. I have nightmares of him appearing, unable to escape, my fate in his hands. Therapy has been instrumental in helping me process my grief, guilt, and trauma. It's been a long journey of soul-searching and self-forgiveness. With time and hard work, I'm healing and rebuilding my life. I've learned to accept that I'm not responsible for Patrick's actions, even if my affair was the catalyst. Telling my family was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Their love and support have meant everything, even if some relationships still carry a strain. Every day I work to prove through my actions how deeply I regret my mistakes and am committed to being a better person. 5 years ago, I was ready to give up on life. Now, I'm slowly learning to embrace it again, changed forever but determined not to let my past define me. I'm back at my teaching job, focusing on my students. Some days, their energy and potential are what keep me going. Dating still feels out of the question. My therapist says I may never feel safe in a relationship again, and that's okay. I'm building a full life on my own, with friends and family and meaningful work. I'm realizing I don't need a man to be whole. Not a day passes that I don't carry the weight of what happened. The guilt, the heartache, the fear, the unanswered questions. Some wounds never fully heal. But I'm a survivor, getting stronger each day, determined to lead a life of purpose. For Anthony, for Patrick, and for myself. To honor those I've lost and betrayed with how I live now. It's all any of us can do. I still catch myself looking over my shoulder, wondering if today is the day Patrick resurfaces to finish what he started. But I'm learning to focus more on what's ahead than behind. No one can predict the future. All we can do is our best with each new day we're given. Whatever comes, I'll face it as the woman I am now. Scarred, but strong. Flawed, but always evolving. Fractured,